I have hanging next to me here several common safety stirrups, one of which has been banned by not just one, but now two major equestrian organizations here in the United States and by another equestrian organization in Canada. And I'm going to venture to guess that several other equine organizations and groups are going to be following soon. You probably have several pairs of this specific banned safety stirrup in your barn, and possibly currently hanging on a lesson saddle that you're using with students to this very day. So let's go ahead and take a few minutes and dig into this very important topic. We're going to go over the history of the how and why this specific stirrup actually got banned, because there's a very important lesson and takeaway that we can get from this situation. We're going to discuss what this means to us as adaptive, or also called therapeutic, horseback riding instructors. And then I'm going to give you some very important things to consider when you are thinking about whether or not you should remove this banned stirrup from your barn altogether. How fast are you or are you not going to react to this situation? And if you do decide to move away from this banned stirrup, what are some alternative safety stirrup options for you? My name is Sabre Popoli, and I'm the owner and founder of Hoof Falls and Footfalls. And through Hoof Falls and Footfalls, I am on a mission to help educate, equip, and encourage fellow adaptive, or also called therapeutic, horseback riding instructors, not only here in the United States where I'm based, but also around the world. So I'm a lifelong equestrian, and I have spent over 15 years in the equine assisted services industry. And during my time around horses, growing up around them, and then also now being a professional in this industry, I have seen many different pieces of tack and equipment and different tools and devices and teaching techniques kind of come and go. So we need to be ready to adapt with the changes and roll with it and use these situations as something we can learn from. So let's go ahead and jump in to talking about the banned stirrup with that mindset. So here I have all the stirrups next to me, and you might have been looking to see if you could identify which one was the banned one. And if you guessed this one, our Peacock stirrup, you are correct. So at the time of recording, the United States Pony Club has currently banned this for all of their events coming up. And then the United States Equestrian Federation here also said that by the end of the year, this stirrup is no longer allowed in their events. And the Canadian Pony Club has also said that the Peacock stirrup is not allowed. And I'm going to guess that several other organizations are going to be making this same call or same push formally. Several already do highly discourage this Peacock stirrup, but I'm going to guess that several of them are going to formally call for this to be officially not allowed at events due to safety issues. So I want to just quickly kind of share the how and the why of why we got to this point with this specific piece of tack and the important lesson as instructors that we should be taking away from this. I'm actually very familiar with this situation because not only have I used these for years personally growing up as a kid, but also as an instructor, I use these on my lesson tack, and several of my students use these. Another way that I'm very familiar with this, and the dangers actually of this supposed safety stirrup equipment, is that I was a professional testimony, an industry expert that was actually brought on by a lawyer that was representing a student who had been severely hurt by one of these. And that student, unfortunately, is not the only student that has been injured by this supposed piece of safety equipment. So what had happened with that student and several other students, I have heard of this many times, and also thankfully early on in my teaching career, my mentor gave me a heads up about the Peacock stirrup and how to safely use it if I was going to use it, and so thankfully she helped me avoid this situation. But what had happened is the student had gone to get off of their horse. They were not taught how to appropriately move this stirrup up and out of the way before a dismount, and as they slid down, not only did the crotch of their breeches get caught on this hook here, but also their body parts that are in that same region. And the hook not only tore the piece of clothing, but also the body parts that were under that clothing. I will just leave it at that. That student did have to get reconstructive surgery because of the extent of the damages that were caused by this stirrup. And even if a student were sliding down and they didn't necessarily get their actual body parts hung up on here, I have also seen and witnessed and also heard of from other instructors their students sliding down, and especially the littles, they'll get stuck on like a buckle or their shirt, and they'll be hanging there off the side of their horse of, help me, I'm stuck. And it's kind of a laughing moment, but could easily turn serious and very dangerous in some situations. So actually moving these out of the way during the dismount and the safety concerns that happen when we get off with these stirrups is one of the really, really big reasons why this stirrup has actually been pushed to be formally banned by a couple equestrian organizations. And like I said, there are some that are recommending we don't use it, even though they have not formally said yet this is not allowed and it's a hard rule. But kind of reading, writing on the wall, I think it's probably coming. And the important takeaway from this situation is that just because a piece of tack or equipment or training device or method or whatever it is advertised as safe or a safety piece of equipment or suitable for XYZ students, it doesn't necessarily mean that it actually is. Us as instructors, me and you, we have to use our brains and actually assess if the intended idea and outcome of how that thing is supposed to function actually happens, or are there risks associated with using that piece of tack or equipment or method that actually outweigh the potential positive benefits? Because yes, this does have positive benefits, but if it's used incorrectly, so turned out, this metal piece blocks the foot from falling free, or a student slides down on top of it as they're dismounting, the risks associated with it could outweigh the potential benefits of this being a breakaway safety stirrup. So that's a little bit of the history of how this piece of tack and equipment kind of got to this situation. And the takeaway lesson that we should have, I am not one for massive, bans or governing bodies coming down saying you can't do this or this. I think we should kind of, self-govern ourselves and use our brains and use our critical thinking skills and just don't use equipment like this. And yeah, even though it's made out there, it doesn't necessarily mean it's safe or actually going to do what it's advertised to do. So use your brains, okay? So what does this whole ban stirrup situation mean for adaptive riding instructors? Because this Peacock stirrup is a very common safety stirrup seen in not only traditional lesson programs, but very commonly in adaptive, or also called therapeutic, horseback riding programs. And this has commonly been one of the top recommended safety stirrups, at least here in the United States. Well, at the time of recording this video, and by the time you're listening, things maybe have changed, but the major organizations here in the United States that do training and certifications for adaptive horseback riding instructors, they have not officially said that the Peacock stirrup is no longer allowed. One of them has kind of started to discourage its use because of the safety issues, but again, hasn't strictly outruled it or outlawed it. So we want to probably, as adaptive horseback riding instructors, we should be getting ahead of the game. So even though This stirrup hasn't officially been banned yet by our governing organizations and the leading entities out there for adaptive riding. We should be proactive about this situation because we know the risks involved with using this, and I would say that the possible positive benefits of this do not outweigh the safety risks. I have personally stopped using these. I haven't used these for several years, and actually this pad in here, which is why it's all crusty and gross, is because it's just been sitting in my tack room as a sample piece of tack and equipment. I hung on to a pair just so I had these as reference, but I have not used these for a while because I was just tired of having to be really careful with these. I did use them for a while though because they are smaller. They're good for smaller riders because some of the other alternative safety stirrups I'm going to talk about, it can be a little difficult to find a smaller stirrup in that format. I never really use these though for larger riders or adults or teens because the larger this gets, the less stable this is over time and it would actually flex out. So these were ones I kind of only use for youth riders, but like I said, I stopped using these years ago. I would highly encourage you as a fellow adaptive riding instructor to start moving away from these now, because I'm going to guess that our organizations in the equine assisted services industry are probably going to be following some of the mainstream equine organizations, and we should just kind of start planning ahead. And like I said, anyways, the safety risk involved with using these and the extra steps of management to actually have the safety problems not happen just really aren't worth it. And it's an extra moving piece that doesn't work well. And for us as adaptive riding instructors, this hook can actually get hung up on your sidewalkers and your volunteers. So we have an extra safety concern when it comes to how we would utilize this with our students of, I would just say, let's move away from this, okay? So as instructors, you're probably wondering, well, what do I do? What are other safety options out there since this has been so heavily pushed in the adaptive riding world? What do I do? So hanging here next to me, I have several different safety stirrup options. The first one here, I've got a flex iron stirrup. This is a smaller size. This is actually smaller than what I personally would use. And this is typically recognized as a safety stirrup because there's flex here. So if the foot got stuck, it would bend out and help open up room for that foot to slip free. The thing that you do have to be aware of with these though is that the top of the stirrup doesn't narrow and that foot can't fall through or fall out because of the top getting too narrow. So make sure that if you do use this option that the opening at the top is wide enough. I have had some students though tell me that they don't like the little flex in here and that it can kind of set off some of the warning systems in their body and they just don't feel stable. So just a little side note there that this may not be a good fit for all students. But this type of flexi iron could be a potential alternative. There are several different price ranges on this, from fairly affordable to very, very expensive. Also different weights, so make sure you are familiar with the different weights and the quality of the materials being used, and like I said, the actual shape and function of this. So this could be a potential option. Already talked about our Peacock stirrup, do away with it, save it as a relic of the past. Our next option here is a cage stirrup. You can also get these cages to secure onto traditional stirrups. Cage stirrups, this could also potentially be called like a Devonshire if it's like a hooded leather stirrup cover that goes over it. Kind of English version of what we would call like a tapadero in a Western situation. These are my last choice personally because of how bulky these are, and also for a lot of students, they like to kind of fiddle around with it, or they'll try to push their foot all the way in to kind of feel their toe against the back of it, or they're so bothered by that cage kind of touching their foot. I'm one of these where it is just not a very sensory friendly stirrup. I personally hate riding in these, and if I do ride in like a tapadero for a Western saddle, it's got to be huge and more of a like functional brush cover or something like that. But these are okay for students that really like to shove their foot through and ride toe down. However, even though these are a good safety alternative, not my first pick. Also, a little heads up, make sure that if you do get a cover for the stirrup, and it's more of that Devonshire style, that the bottom here, there's not a hole where the toe could fall through and kind of get wedged and stuck. Not as common in the English stirrup setting. It's more commonly seen in like the little kid Western tapadero type stirrups, but just a heads up if you do decide to go with these. All right, our other option that we have here, and is my personal first pick for students. I personally ride in the Flexies, and I've got a couple students that like it, but the S stirrups, or they're also sometimes called like a bent leg stirrup, these are my go-to for safety stirrups, and these have been for several years. Like I said, I haven't used the Peacock stirrup for several years because of the reasons I already mentioned. The S stirrups do come in a single bend, and there is a double bend. So you'd have an S curve on this side and an S curve the other way. And that means that no matter what side you put the stirrups on, if it's a double S, that it would, as long as you get it on the correct side and you don't have to worry about it getting flipped and all of that, it's going to be safe no matter what. If you have a single bend S, you do need to make sure that your stirrup leather and that specific stirrup are going on the correct side of the horse. We want the curve to the horse's nose, and when it's hanging down on the side of the saddle, the bend should be, the bubble should be towards that horse. So curve towards the horse's nose and the bubble towards the saddle. So this one would go on the left side of the horse, or the near side. That's what side this specific stirrup would need to go on based off of this curve here, okay? This is an adult-sized S stirrup. I do have a youth-sized S stirrup here as well. I will be completely transparent that finding the smaller stirrups in this style, both the single and the double curve, is a little bit trickier. The larger sizes are definitely easier to find, but if you can find a small size, definitely grab it up because they can be hard to run by. Again, price difference varies. Usually these S stirrups are fairly reasonable. They're probably one of the more affordable ones out of our different options here. These cage stirrups are usually pretty inexpensive too. But you're probably going to be able to find a quality S stirrup or bent leg stirrup for a little better price than the Flexi irons. There are also several other safety stirrups or items that are promoted as safety stirrups out there because they have kind of seen the industry shift, and there's supposedly new technology. So just like we talked about using our brains to assess whether that item is actually going to do the thing that it's advertised to do and whether or not there are additional risks associated with it, we've got to use our brains when assessing those other items. One, a lot of the other safety stirrups that are out there are incredibly expensive and so may not be attainable on our budget as instructors or adaptive riding centers. Also, there are some other alternative options that are supposedly Peacock stirrup replacements that are going to be causing similar issues. The side of some of those other advertised stirrups still have an opening that could get hung up on your clothing or body parts. So again, let's make sure that with these new pieces that are being advertised as safety stirrups and better than the Peacock stirrups, make sure that they're not going to be causing the same safety issues that the Peacock stirrup was causing, and why we ended up having it get to the ban list by some organizations and probably more here in the future. So budget-friendly stirrup options down in the links below of wherever you are watching or listening from. I will put links to my Amazon storefront where I do have safety stirrups options linked in my cart. I try really hard to actually put the exact brand and type that I've personally used and know are of pretty decent quality. This is not sponsored by Amazon in any way, shape, or form, or any other companies. My Amazon affiliate link, I do get, pennies back if you click through it. So much appreciated if you use those links. And by the way, if you're a nonprofit program or even for-profit program, you should get an Amazon storefront for your program. It's a really nice thing to do. So let me know down in the comments below, where are you on this whole stirrup ban thing? Do you still currently use Peacock stirrups? Were you one that kind of jumped off the bus early and knew that these really weren't as safe as they were promoted to be? Is this totally new to you and maybe you've never even heard of the Peacock stirrup? And also, if you don't use Peacock stirrups anymore at all or are planning not to use them in the future and moving away from them, what is going to be your go-to alternative safety option? I would love to hear from you. So thanks for tuning in. If this information was helpful to you as an adaptive riding instructor, please like, comment, and share on whatever platform you're on. It is much appreciated. It helps push this information out to fellow instructors that are serving students just like you and I are, and so that we can serve them with the best information possible and keep them as safe as possible as well. So all I ask for is a quick like, a comment, and also a comment because I want to hear from you. I like having chats with you guys, and I do read them and comment back to you guys for discussion. So thanks again, and I'll see you on the next episode.